Kamen Rider Build.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with my review of Kamen Rider Build episode 30. So this was an interesting episode. It was kind of the beginning of some revelations and some planting of some seeds. That sounds creepy, but you know, for this next storyline, which now it looks like we're getting more into the Mars stuff. Misora, as we know last time, was, I couldn't remember if it was a princess or a queen or whatever, but it was Queen Vaseline or whatever her name is. I'm gonna call her that. She was possessed by her, and she kind of got to talk to the gang a little bit about who she was and how Mars was destroyed. And she's like, "Oh, you don't know who you are, do you, Ryuuga?" And there was like a funny moment with the T. And she sort of described like, "Oh, Mars was destroyed because of Pandora's Box and this guy Evolt." So she sort of laid some groundwork, was kind of vague about it, didn't give us too many answers, and she basically talked about how the life force she put into this body in Misora, that setup is not going to work forever. And then she faded away. There was some really funny dialogue with them where she's like, "Oh, I'm not from around these parts," and Ryuga's like, "Well, what is not from around these parts? It's Mars or whatever." And then so like I think it was Greece that said like, "Oh, upstate" or something, or like uptown. I don't know. It was really funny, like exchanges between them and her, and then like riffing on each other. Speaking of, I loved the little intro monologue this week where you have the Nanba Industries guy come in and talks about, like, he slips up and kind of reveals himself in the monologue, and Sento's like, "Wait a minute, why would that be the case? Aren't you the president guy?" And he's like, "Oh, I revealed a spoiler in the monologue," and obviously that's not real. Like, I mean, they didn't figure it out, because like, the monologues take place in this weird alternate dimension where they narrate themselves, where they are in character but they're not the same characters. You know what I mean? Like, it's not to be taken seriously. Like, I don't want a Wikipedia page on narration timeline. It's funny. It was really good. It was one of my more favorites. But speaking of funny stuff, I love the interactions with that. And they also were trying to come up with basically theories about what's gonna go on and what's happening with little like stick figures of them, like with drawn up clothes and their little actual pictures of their faces, and there was some of that was a bit over the top, but I mostly enjoyed it because I like the cast. I think they do humor chemistry well. And there was like a callback to when Ryuuga was giving his life story, and he starts at the beginning, and Sento's like, "We don't need to hear the whole thing," and I enjoyed that bit because it's like a funny twist on, you know, that typical trope of someone giving a backstory like that. And it was also, again, a callback to earlier in the series. But I do think the gag of there being like a visual screen being pulled down was a little bit too cartoony for me, but that was really my only nitpick about that. But basically they kind of alluded that Ryuga's special somehow. He also blocked the shot from Stalk's Mars blast at the beginning, so his splash driver is like burnt up, and his jelly thing got crusted into a new thing that he magmized or something, and so they came up with the new magma puncher, which I like. I'm interested to see how they do this, because this was just basically like, "Oh, your driver's broken, let's just give you a new upgrade to you know, remedy that." I'm hoping we get a little bit more into like how it's connected to what Ryuuga did, because it's like replacing the splash driver. And I mean, to be fair, like, Bill's able to keep up with splash driver people and stuff with all his upgrades, but I thought it was an interesting way to go about it. Again, I hope they expand on it a little bit. I'm sure they will, at least somewhat. I also like that we got to see Claw's regular suit. Even though Claw's charge I've really grown to like a lot, I do slightly prefer the original one still, so it was good to see it, and good to see it probably get its, maybe not last appearance, but a good appearance before the upgrade, because he'll probably mostly be using the upgrade after he gets it next week. You know, we might see Claws one or two more times regular, probably see it in like a movie or something down the line, or a team up or something. So I don't think it's like the last time we'll ever see the Claws regular suit, but it was nice that they gave us an episode with it before we get the magma form. So that was cool to see that. And Sento came up with this plan to basically get himself out of being a government employee so that he could go over and get Pandora's Box without it being considered an invasion, like an active war invasion by the government. And then like Ryuuga and Greece turned it around so that they were still working for the government, but their mission was to go back in and get him and Pandora's Box that they assumed he would have, like, so that the government could go in there, but they wouldn't be in trouble because their mission wasn't invading. It was like, it was kind of funny because the best part of that whole convoluted shtick was after Ryuuga and him were like, "Oh, we're not gonna let you do this alone, our mission's like legal," or whatever. Bill just kind of stands there for a second and he goes, "They're stealing my heroic thunder," and I thought that was funny. And as they're trying to do this, and they're fighting to go get Pandora's box, Stalk's like logging into the Pandora's box and activating all these security systems and like controlling it by going like, "Oh," like that was weird. If you saw my hand, it would be weirder. But and speaking of Stalk, we got a little revelation, a little like hint about him, that there's two, like there's Stalk is a whole other personality, probably Evolt, this kind of generic big bad we seem to have set up. And that's like the name of that upcoming rider suit, I think, if I remember from the scans. Like, I only look at the pictures, so there might be some details out there that I'm not fully aware of. But based on the pictures, we have a new rider coming. I think it was Evolt, like Evolution, Evolt, I don't know. I'm pretty sure, like 80%, 85. Let's be confident. But yeah, so it appears just on a hint that it's like actual owner, nice guy, is a person, and he's got like this possession. And I'm not too sure how I feel about that. I think that takes away a lot of what makes him a cool villain. I think we all assumed, almost knew that something, I mean, obviously we knew something happened to him on Mars. We didn't know what. We didn't know whether, up until this point, we weren't sure if it was a possession. Is it a brainwashing? Was it a little bit of brainwashing where he just kind of went nuts, but is kind of acting of his own accord? I was kind of hoping if they went a possession-y route, it was more like they became one, and so it's still him. Because what makes him interesting is the fact that he is a character that was an ally and that we kind of cared about in a way. And he kind of had, I think I mentioned this when he was first outed as Stalk, reminded me of Reverse Flash, where his main goal is to act against the heroes, but having to be in such close proximity to them and mentor them, he kind of developed an attachment for them. And it creates an interesting, complicated villain-hero relationship. And I think it's just too easy and generic if it's just like, oh, he was a normal guy and he was just possessed by this evil Mars demon. So I hope, I want to reserve judgment, because literally all we got was a scene of him being like, "What are you doing?" And Stalk's like, "Shut up, I have a cooler voice." So I want to reserve judgment until we get more details, but I just hope it's better than just that straightforward stuff. It's kind of like with Cuervo, where in Q-Ranger, where it was his own motivations that drove him once he fused with Dawn, but I kind of thought it would be more interesting if it was just straight up Cuervo taking over the name of Dawn Aramage instead of having him being evolved at all. That's a Q-Ranger bit, but that's what it kind of reminds me of, is I think that it'd be more interesting if Stalk was Stalk. You know, obviously he's involved slash affected by this evil stuff, but just I don't want it to be so easy where at the end he's like, "Oh, I'm absolved of everything, let's be all BFFs." But yeah, we'll see. It's hard to tell right now because it's literally one scene, but I just want to be cautious about it because I know how these type of things go. Who knows, maybe he could end up being like an Enter, where Enter was like serving Messiah the whole time, and then at the end he's like, "Look at me, I'm the big bad now," and he like took over. Maybe that'll happen, I don't know, but he's probably Evolt. Anyway, but yeah, that's, even though I thought this was a good episode at laying the groundwork for this next bits in the story arc, I'm just a little bit cautious about a couple of things they introduced. Mainly, like I just went over for like 3 minutes, the stuff with Stalk, and also the Ryuuga stuff. That definitely I'm reserving judgment on until we get more backstory next week and in the following weeks. But I'm just not a fan of everybody being special, because even though obviously this isn't coming out of nowhere, like it doesn't seem like a random turn. Like they've definitely laid the groundwork for this with Ryuuga, with his hazard level and all these other little hints. But I liked the idea of Ryuuga just kind of being this guy that got caught up in this. I thought it was a good arc where he just, like I said, got caught up in this and had to sort of go on this arc to becoming a Kamen Rider. And with Sento, I kind of felt the same way originally when I thought he was just a rock star, but I think ultimately the choice of making him the mad scientist that created the system is cooler. I just don't like the idea of everybody being special. But again, I want to reserve judgment because I'm glad we're at least getting focus on him now, but we'll see. Talk more about that in the coming weeks. But overall, this was still a solid episode that set things up. I'm just very cautious about some of the directions they may or may not be taking. Overall, 8 for the episode, though. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It's Awesome Rider, signing out.